Khruschev was a leader of Soviet Russia. Under Soviet Russia, we protect Cuba. Under Soviet Russia, we give health care to everybody. Under Soviet Russia. So, I want to talk a little bit about Khruschev. Okay, so let's just begin. Let's just hop right on into it. Now, he's talking about a whole bunch of shit. He's talking about the 6-Day War. He's talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Even got a couple words about our beloved president, JFK. So this is Khruschev Remembers. And there's good old Khruschev there on the back, looking nice and slender. And 340, page 340, if you got the book, you can follow along. Relations with the Arab world. So this is him reflecting as his prime minister, president, what the fuck ever, of Russia. He's the chief executive, right? Our relations with the Arab world improved dramatically after 1956, when we intervened to put an end to the French, English, and Israeli aggression against Egypt. And I think it's the Suez Canal crisis. And eventually, so you got the Suez Canal crisis. And then we counteracted the U.S. landing in Lebanon. This is 50s, right? So, not by military means, but by mobilizing world public opinion. The invasion met with outbursts of public protest from all over the world. We also began demonstrative military preparations to show that we would be ready and willing to extend military aid in the Near East if it were needed. We then raised the matter in the United Nations and forced the Americans to withdraw their troops from Lebanon. And then he's going to talk about how they helped Syria, something about Iraq, leadership of Qassam, Nuri Saeed, the Crown Prince al-Badr. He's talking about Yemen. Okay, so he talks about a whole number of subjects. But I want to focus on this U.S. landing in Lebanon. Now, this U.S. landing in Lebanon is President Eisenhower, and we're going to invade Lebanon, and this is the first time that we invaded the Middle East. But it was a wildly successful operation. So it was a good use of military power. It was good use of military power. We got in and we got out. We achieved our objectives, got in, got out, and we were successful, and the country was better off for it, and we were a good, we were a source of goodness and a good mediator to broker the civil war that was happening in Lebanon. So what Khruschev is here is saying, we counteracted the U.S. landing in Lebanon, not by military means, but mobilizing public opinion. Then he also said that they had demonstrative military preparations. So, right, they're having a bunch of military parades and shit on the border of Lebanon. And then the Soviet Union raised the matter in the United Nations, which ultimately, according to Khruschev, is going to force the Americans to withdraw their troops from Lebanon. So, regardless, I mean, if he was, there, not there, whether he did it, intentionally or not intentionally, the 3-month occupation turned out really good for Lebanon and good for America's relationship to the Arab world. So, July 1958, President Eisenhower ordered 5,000 U.S. Marines to help the Lebanese government quell a rebellion. And that's the footnote, right? That's the footnote. That's the whole thing about Lebanon and Eisenhower. Now, I'm going to get into the details of Lebanon and Eisenhower. But I want to compare and contrast it with Ronald Reagan when he invaded Lebanon. So, Ronald Reagan is going to invade Lebanon. It's going to be a 1 to 2 year occupation. And then apparently Hezbollah, is going to drive 2 trucks armed with explosives into the Marine barracks, which was at an hotel at the Beirut airport, and 241 Marines were killed. So after that happened, 241 Marines were killed, then Reagan's going to cut and run after repeatedly saying that he was going to stay. So we invade August 20th, 1982, and then get out shortly after February 7th, 1984. So Reagan would intervene in Lebanon without congressional approval. He just sent 1,800 Marines to Lebanon August 20th, 1982. for this or for that, I don't know, but it's Ronald Reagan's Benghazi, right? Oh, he just cut and run and just left everybody, everything we were fighting for, he just left it all behind. But ultimately, Ronald Reagan, I think, just kind of, weighed the pros and cons, and do we need to be in Lebanon? Do we need to be in Beirut? 241 U.S. Marines were just killed, so either we got to take this whole country over or, pack our bags. And so Ronald Reagan withdrew. So people want to say America is, we've won every single war. We didn't win the war in Somalia under Clinton. We didn't win the war in Lebanon with Reagan. We didn't win the war of 1812. It was a stalemate, but we started it. So ultimately I would say that a tie with a war that you started, loss of treasure, loss of men, lives, blood, and ultimately everything stayed the same. That's a loss. War of 1812 didn't do shit for America. It got us the Star-Spangled Banner, right? So maybe it was all worth it because of that great, great magical song, that nationalistic, patriotic song that just fills my heart with patriot pride. The magic sky cloth and the flag was still there. So that's Reagan's Benghazi. So compare and contrast, whereas Reagan's Lebanese invasion was absolute failure, blunder, and then ultimately, we leave in, disgrace. I don't know if you want to say disgrace, but, I think it's actually, if you're going down the wrong road, it's never too late to turn back around. So once Reagan kind of said, yeah, we're not going to do a big war here, I think it was a good thing that Reagan pulled out of Lebanon, and I think it was a good thing that Clinton pulled out of Somalia. Somalia in the 90s. So the wars that we, quote unquote, lost, sometimes were we supposed to be in the war to begin with? So if it's an illegal war where we're fucking over a lot of people, then it would be better, be more progressive to just stop with that bloodshed and killing, right? So Reagan would stop, and he gets out, so I don't think we're in Lebanon anymore. But that was much different than what had happened not, 20, 30 years ago. So what the fuck happened with Eisenhower and Lebanon? So Khruschev is going to threaten to use nuclear weapons if the U.S. invades Lebanon. There was talk about it. Khruschev, you invade Lebanon, I'm going to use nuclear weapons. So Eisenhower invaded Lebanon, even with a Russian-Soviet Union threat of nuclear annihilation and destruction. Apparently, maybe they're all just, threatening, well, I'm going to nuke you there, nuke you here, and nuke you over everywhere. And so it was like, Khruschev ain't going to do shit. So Eisenhower goes ahead and lands in Lebanon. 4,000 people are going to die in the Lebanese Civil War. 4,000 people, but only 1 to maybe 30 Americans are going to die in the entire occupation. So the Russians in Moscow outside the U.S. Embassy were protesting the Lebanese invasion. The police kept the order, but the people of Russia were pissed. Khruschev takes credit for the U.S. withdrawing out of Lebanon for the public pressure, for the protest, which, he mentioned the protest, and I saw a videotape of the protest. And then also because of going to the United Nations and, causing a stink in the United Nations. So he said that all that were influences, pressure points to getting the U.S. out of Lebanon. Now, this was great. So this is President Eisenhower. As an American, I like reading about, good operations, good, when we do good around the world, I like hearing about this. So President Eisenhower had also opposed the English, French, and Israeli invasion of Egypt. He thought it was imperialistic. So even Eisenhower was in agreement. Even Eisenhower was in agreement when it came to the pessimism